Picture yourself in Italy in the 1920s. World War I has been over for a few years, and you are trying to regain control of your life. You've lost friends and family in the war. The government made many promises to the soldiers who survived, but to this point, they haven't followed through on those promises. The land the Allied powers had promised Italy from Austria-Hungary for fighting on their side during the war was instead given to Yugoslavia. Despite victory in World War I, it doesn't feel like you won much of anything. The world is quickly falling into a global depression, so work is hard to find. Money is worth much less because your government printed too much to pay for the war. Your government is outdated, weak, and divided, and you are losing faith in your leaders. Then, along comes a man who is a strong and decisive military veteran. He marches his followers through your city in their sharp-looking black uniforms. He is promising unity, change, and a better Italy. His new political party, the National Fascist Party, is promising to create work for the people, punish their enemies, and restore Italy to all its former glory. When the next election comes, it's time to vote. Should you vote to keep the weak government that has disappointed you for so long? Or should you put your faith in this new, inspiring leader? This environment allowed many totalitarian dictators in the 20th century who oppressed and murdered millions of their citizens to rise in popularity and power. Previously, we studied World War I's devastating toll on Europe. Today, we'll discuss how this post-war crisis caused some European nations to turn toward fascism, an extreme system of governance rooted in nationalism. We'll use the following questions to guide us through our video. What are the key characteristics of fascism? What defined Mussolini's rule as a totalitarian and fascist regime? Why did fascist regimes spread across Eastern Europe in the 20th century? You should also keep this big picture question in mind. What factors allow extremist political ideologies, like fascism, to gain power in society? Fascism is a political ideology that promotes extreme nationalism and authoritarian rule, often under a single dictator. There are several key characteristics of a fascist regime. First, it promotes extreme militarism, or the glorification of and emphasis on military power in society or government. Second, like totalitarianism, it requires loyalty to a single leader while denying individual rights. This often turns into a cult of personality, similar to what we saw in the Soviet Union under Stalin. Fascism typically encourages the use of uniforms and special salutes and holds mass rallies to promote a singular national identity. Third, fascism is a totalitarian political ideology that values the state over the individual. This means that people are often asked to make self-sacrifices in the name of helping the state grow more powerful. Fourth, fascism promotes nationalist ideas and often includes racist and discriminatory ideologies, which it uses to unite their majority population against one perceived enemy. For example, the Nazi Party in Germany blamed the country's economic struggles on its Jewish population. They began an ethnic persecution campaign that resulted in the deaths of approximately 6 million Jewish people. We will discuss this further soon in another lesson. Fifth, the government is controlled by a single political party, and political opposition is not tolerated. Oftentimes, people who express differing political views from the leader are exiled, imprisoned, or executed. A fascist government controls the economy for its own benefit. It encourages the most successful businesses to continue growing, under the provision that these business owners will use profits to support the nation's militarism. In the name of nationalism, it reduces or completely cuts off trade with foreign countries. Finally, fascism is characterized by censorship, indoctrination, and the use of secret police to suppress dissent and maintain control through the totalitarian methods we learned in Unit 12. Despite being on the opposite ends of the political spectrum, fascist and communist states tend to have similarities. For example, both systems rule with a single dictator and only allow one political party. They deny individual rights and prohibit democracy. However, there are also significant differences between the two ideologies. Communism aims to create a society free of social classes, while fascism believes each class serves an important function. Additionally, communism seeks to unite workers worldwide, while fascism promotes nationalism and does not seek to unify the globe. Pause the video here to answer the question, what are the key characteristics of fascism? Now that we've discussed the core principles of fascism, let's explore an example of a fascist regime in the 20th century. That leader, promising you a better future in Italy, was actually Benito Mussolini, the fascist and totalitarian dictator. After serving in World War I, Mussolini returned to lead the fascist party in their quest for control and opposition to socialism. They seized control of several Italian cities and threatened to take over the government. Faced with a growing crisis, King Victor Emmanuel appointed Mussolini as prime minister. Mussolini immediately rigged elections in the fascists' favor and made suspicion of being an anti-fascist punishable by imprisonment without trial. He created a youth group called the Opera Nazionale Balilla that promoted official fascist ideals to Italian youth and restricted the formation of other youth groups. All students were strongly encouraged to join the Balilla and made to do everything from performing in bands to practicing for poison gas attacks. Mussolini used his large secret police force to spy on his people and identify any anti-fascists and arrest them. His secret police also kept strict surveillance on the Vatican, the center of the Catholic Church, as Mussolini was worried about its power. He arrested all communist members of parliament, expelled all members of the Socialist Party, and imprisoned all those suspected of opposing him. He also controlled the media by mandating that cinemas screen government propaganda, and by controlling a majority of newspapers, issuing daily editorial guidelines, and threatening editors with arrest. Go ahead and pause the video here to answer the question. What defined Mussolini's rule as a totalitarian and fascist regime? The expansion of extremist regimes like Mussolini's quickly spread as fascism began to take root across Eastern Europe. Fascism spread across Eastern Europe in the early 20th century due to a combination of factors, including the economic and social upheaval caused by World War I, the rise of nationalism, and the appeal of fascist leaders with their promises of strong leadership and national renewal. Populations across Europe were grappling with trauma from World War I. Many people felt desperate to avoid another war. They were more willing to accept the iron-fisted rule of an extremist leader to return to stability to their lives and country. Additionally, the weakness of democratic institutions in many Eastern European countries made them more susceptible to the rise of authoritarian regimes. anger over the failure of the Treaty of Versailles and the economic depression also played a role in the spread of fascism. In newly sovereign Hungary, for example, the government first experimented with communism before fascist Admiral Miklós Horthy became the country's first dictator. By 1935, Czechoslovakia was the only remaining democracy in Eastern Europe. Of all the fascist dictators in Europe in the 20th century, no one was more powerful than Adolf Hitler. And we'll get to him soon. Pause the video here to reflect on the question, why did fascist regimes spread across Eastern Europe in the 20th century? As nations tried to recover from World War I, extreme ideologies spread throughout the weakened governments. The world would soon take another hit as an economic depression struck, making citizens even more desperate for a strong leader with a solution. In our next lesson, we'll explore the Great Depression and watch the ripple effects of the economic downturn spread across the globe, because history is everywhere. Hey, hey.